Hey, what's going on YouTube? Hyperdark19 here, bringing you another deck profile in my Breaking the Meta segment. This one, if you hadn't seen the title already, is called Tethys Turbo. I'll get to the deck in just a minute. I'll explain first, as a little preface, kind of where I came up with this deck idea. I've been sitting here for the last week trying to come up with a decent deck from the 3 copies that I bought of the recently released, structure deck called Lost Sanctuary, which is the fairy structure deck. In case you didn't know, has a lot of great new cards and especially a lot of good agent monsters. So if you remember them, I've been sitting here trying to make a decent deck out of it, and even though there are a lot of awesome cards, the decks that I've tried, I tried various combinations of cards, and just none of them seem to really work out because despite the fact that there are possibilities for great, powerful plays, great openings, great everything, there's some really awesome cards in this deck. It was never consistent. It never worked out consistently. The consistency was all off. It was awful. So I was getting really upset and frustrated about this and was almost ready to give up on the deck altogether when I thought about it and I came up with this little insight. Well, I mean, it's not really an insight because probably a lot of people know this, but I just realized it myself. One thing that every Yu-Gi-Oh player loves to do more than anything else is draw cards. I mean, drawing cards, cards that draw cards are some of the most broken cards and like banned cards in the game. I mean, look at Pot of Greed for example. That's been banned for a really, really long time. I mean, you just play it and you draw 2 cards. It's a automatic +1 for no cost. And while that may not seem like a huge deal to some people, even just one little +1 in this game without any cost like that can mean the difference between winning and losing. And that's why card drawing is so important. I mean, look at Upstart Goblin, for example. It's a horrible card, I think. You play it, your opponent gains 1,000 life points just to draw an extra card for yourself, and people are teching that card into all kinds of decks. So it just shows you how desperate to draw cards most Yu-Gi-Oh players are. So with that in mind, this deck is all about drawing cards, and I will show it to you now. This is the deck I came up with out of the Lost Sanctuary structure deck, and some other cards that I had lying around. Also, it's really good because it pretty much if you buy 3 copies of the structure deck, you can make this deck. So I'll just get to it. First off, for the monster lineup, we have 3 Tethys Goddess of Light. This card, 3 copies because this card is the key card of this deck, in case you hadn't guessed that from the name. Tethys is the key to what makes this deck happen, and I will explain more of why that is when I go on. So 3 Tethys. Now moving on to the agent lineup. Out of the structure deck we have 3 Agent of Mystery Earth. This is your Maki Nagir frame for the deck because it pretty much, when you normal summon it, it searches out any one of your agent fairies. If Sanctuary in the Sky, the field spell, is on the field, you can search out Master Hyperion, your boss monster. So it's 1,000 attack, not that great, but it is a 2-star tuner. So makes synchro plays possible, really good synchro plays. I mean, this with Tethys makes either Black Rose, Ancient Sacred Wyvern, all kinds of good 7-stars. So yeah, 3 Earths, definitely a staple in this deck. Next up for the agent lineup, we have 3, the other super rare of the deck, 3 Agent of Miracles Jupiter. This card is really overlooked, I think, because a lot of people don't play it in their builds. In this build especially, and a lot of builds, I think this card is really, really good. It's 1,800, 4-star beater, which is good anyway. It's just another fairy monster, which is great. It has the ability you can remove an agent monster in your graveyard from play once per turn to boost the attack of a fairy, even Jupiter himself, by 800 until the end of the turn, which is a decent effect, granted, not game-breaking. But if Sanctuary in the Sky is on the field, you can discard a fairy-type monster to special summon one of your remove from play fairy monsters, which is awesome. And you'll see why. I mean, this card, I was trying to play it in a lot of my builds, and it just, the discard ability is awesome, but it ends up you have no cards left in your hand, and you're just open to whatever plays your opponent has. But with this deck, that's not a problem, and I'll show you why later on. Next up, last agent monsters per se in the deck, we have 2 Agent of Creation Venus. This card really doesn't have much of a purpose other than spamming Mystic Shine Balls. If you don't know what Mystic Shine Ball is, I'll show you my 3 copies right here. Just regular, normal monster, 2 stars, 500 attack, and 500 defense. It's really not that great of a monster at all. Just Venus spams these guys to the field for 500 life points apiece. You can do it any amount of times a turn, so you get 3 of them out. Four guys, 1 turn. Very, very good. Makes for good synchro plays with Earth. If you can summon Earth, search this guy, and protect Earth until your next turn. Makes any level of synchro pretty much. Trishula, Mistworm, Stardust, anything you can think of. And also, Venus is very, very good. Mostly because it searches out these guys. Forgot what I was going to say there. Yeah, I'll get back to it, but you see, 2 Venus, 3 is overkill because you really don't need it. 3 Shine Balls. When you get these guys in your hand, they can sometimes be dead cards, but that takes care of itself a little bit, and you'll see that later on. 3 of those. Also, they load up the graveyard very nicely for the next card. 3 copies of your boss, Master Hyperion. This guy is really awesome. He's the Dark Arm Dragon of light monsters. Remove from play an agent monster from your hand on the field or your graveyard to special summon this guy. He's got 2700 attack, which is only 100 short of Dark Armed. And he's got the Dark Armed effect, where once per turn you can remove a light fairy from your graveyard from play to destroy 1 card on the field. How good. However, if Sanctuary in the Sky is on the field, he can do that twice per turn. 2 cards destroyed every turn. Makes this a really, really, really good card, especially if your graveyard is loaded up from Venus, Shine Ball plays. And yeah, he's awesome. Just gets even better with the rest of the cards in this deck, you'll see. Next up, for some more huge beaters coming out of the structure deck, we have 2 Splendid Venus. This is my replacement for Christia, pretty much. Christia, I know, is a really awesome card, but Christia really doesn't have a place in this deck because not allowing yourself to special summon can really screw this deck up. So, yeah, I don't play Christia in this deck at all. You don't need it. You really don't need it in this deck. But this guy, Splendid Venus, is almost as good because he's also got 2800 attack. While he can't special summon himself, you can easily special summon him with some of the other cards I have in this deck. Yeah, he's got 2800 attack, like I said. All other non-fairy monsters on the field lose 500 attack as long as this guy is out, which makes him extremely powerful because he can run over pretty much anything with 3200 attack or less by himself, and it weakens him for all your other high-power fairy monsters. So, really, really good. Awesome card to tech in here. And next, we have also a big beater, 2 copies of Athena. This is the replacement for Christia from the structure deck that we didn't get because they got it in Japan, but we didn't. Sucks, but what are you going to do? Athena, I feel, is a really overlooked card because of its interactions with a lot of other cards in this deck. It's got 2600, 7 stars, okay, but once per turn, you can sacrifice another fairy you control to special summon a fairy monster from your graveyard. And if that wasn't good enough for you, every time a fairy monster is summoned while Athena is on the field, any kind of summon, you inflict 600 damage to your opponent. Now, that may not sound like much, but just consider this opening play. I play Valhalla in this deck, so you play Valhalla, special summon this guy, normal summon your Venus, pay 1500 to get the 3 Mystic Shine Balls out, then sacrifice one of the Shine Balls with Athena's effect to summon a big beater from your graveyard, hopefully. You just did 3,000 damage to your opponent with 5 summons, and you're about to do a lot more with Athena's attack and hopefully the big beater you summon from your graveyard. So Athena is really, really, really good, and you definitely should play it if you can. Next up, I know this is a hefty monster lineup, and you'll see why. We have 2 Zeratus, the Herald of Heaven, 2100 attack beater. You can't play him unless Sanctuary in the Sky is on the field, which is okay because you can also discard him from your hand to search Sanctuary. So this is your Gravekeeper's Commandant for your field spell, which field spell, in case you hadn't already noticed, helps out a lot by making these monsters even more powerful than they were before. I'm running out of time. I'll try to speed this up. 2 copies of Hecatrice, discard, search for Valhalla. Valhalla is another key card in this deck. And it loads, and both those guys help load up your graveyard even more, so it's good stuff. And last for the monster lineup, 1 Honest. Duh. It's light monsters, they're fairies. This guy works awesomely with them. You can use Jupiter and Hyperion to loop this guy back into play to your hand. Loop Honest over and over. Jupiter loops pretty much everything, but you can loop Honest especially. Great combo. Great card for this deck. Staple. Next up, the only staple spell cards I have in this deck are these two, Monster Reborn and Dark Hole. And yeah, I mean, they're both obviously really good cards, but you'll see why I only played two of them. I have 2 copies of the Field Spell Sanctuary in the Sky. While this card is on the field, whenever one of your fairy monsters battles, you don't take any damage, which is an okay effect for a field spell. I mean, it's not game breaking, but it does save you from a lot of damage. That way they can only hit you with direct attacks, which is pretty decent. Also, it turns on the effects of all your agents in case you hadn't noticed, so you pretty much have to play it if you're playing agents, I think. Then we have 2 copies of Valhalla Hall of the Fallen, another common from the structure deck. Once per turn, you can special summon a fairy monster from your hand if you have no monsters on the field. It's not like Cyber Dragon. Your opponent doesn't have to have monsters. You can just do it on your first turn if you wanted. Great way to get your big beaters into play fast. Yeah, pretty much staple for this deck. Get out Tethys first turn with this card. Pretty much a staple. Then next up, where the deck gets interesting, we have 3 copies of Hand Destruction. This card, Hand Destruction, is really a -1 if you think about it, because you're playing it to discard 2 cards and draw 2 new ones. So really, you lost Hand Destruction, you gained 2. It's a -1, really. But in this deck, it turns into ridiculous pluses, because let's say you play Valhalla, you special summon Tethys first turn, then you play Hand Destruction, and the sheer amount of monsters in this deck is going to make you draw 10 to 15 cards. Like, I'm not even kidding. Especially if you draw multiple copies of Hand Destruction, you can draw 10 to 15, maybe even 20 cards in one turn. I know it sounds ridiculous, but you have to try this deck out to see what I mean. It is simply amazing, and that is why Tethys is extremely good in this deck, and this deck is called Tethys Turbo, because it's all about abusing Tethys and your draw spells to draw lots and lots and lots of cards, and hopefully OTK next turn. It is really amazing. Hand Destruction's a staple. Also, another draw card in here, 3 copies of Cards from the Sky, the new fairy draw spell. You remove a fairy from your hand to draw 2 cards. You can't special summon or conduct your battle phase that turn. This is pretty much your setup card for your big plays, so you can make your big plays next turn. Also, it removes them from play, so it interacts really well with your Jupiter, because you can loop it right back into play next turn. So, yeah, really good card, definite. And then last 2 cards, the only 2 trap cards I run, Torrential and Mirror Force. Pretty much staples, clears the field, opens up for your OTKs, protects your cards. Now, I know it seems like a little bit of a random monster lineup, but I swear, try this deck out. You will be amazed at how well it works. You can draw your entire deck in one turn if you have a really good hand. So it's just incredibly amazing. Really, it sounds like I'm bragging, but I'm not. I'm really amazed by how well this deck is working. So please comment, subscribe, tell me what you think about this deck and my others. Try this out for yourself. I really encourage you to, because I really think it's awesome. So yeah, I'd love to explain more, but for time reasons, I really can't. So try it out, and you'll see what I mean. This deck is really cool. For next time, rule the meta. Don't let the meta rule you. Peace out, YouTube.